Man, you know what blows my mind? When you actually sit down and look at history, you realize that strength doesn't always come from the people on the battlefield or the ones screaming the loudest. Sometimes it comes from this insane inner confidence, this quiet resilience, this ability to see truth when nobody else around you can, and one of the greatest examples of that is Hazrat Khadijah's Rafe. She was a powerhouse of her time, not because someone handed her influence or because society celebrated her achievements, but because she built it all with her own determination, grit, and vision. Imagine a world where women were barely acknowledged, where the measure of strength was often tied to physical dominance or tribal power, and yet here was someone who rose above it all. She created a life where people respected her not just for her wealth, but for her character. It's one thing to be rich, it's another thing to be respected. And she had both, because she carried herself with dignity, with intelligence, with a kind of calm authority that drew people in. Think about what that means in today's world. How many people do we know who chase after recognition, who work themselves to the bone just to be seen, who confuse loudness with leadership? But true power isn't in noise, it's in consistency. It's in building something that no one can deny. She ran her business, made decisions with courage, and created opportunities in an environment where others thought it was impossible. And isn't that the same lesson we need right now? You don't wait for permission to be strong. You don't wait for society to clap for you. You decide every day that your worth is not defined by the limits others put on you. Picture yourself walking into a room where everyone doubts you, where people whisper about what you can or can't do, and instead of shrinking, you stand taller. You let your work speak, your actions speak, your discipline speak. That's what she did. She didn't need to announce her power. She lived it. It's the same way an athlete proves themselves not with words, but with hours in the gym, or how an artist proves themselves not with excuses, but with the art they put into the world. It's about the grind, the persistence, the unwavering clarity that you know your value. What really makes her story powerful is that she didn't just thrive in silence. She thrived in a storm when the odds were against her, when society had already written the script that women weren't meant to lead or succeed. She rewrote it. She became the example that leadership isn't about gender, it's about mindset. That wealth isn't just about accumulation. It's about how you carry it, how you use it, how you own it without letting it own you. That's the kind of lesson that should shake us today. How many of us are trapped by the fear of judgment, by the fear of stepping outside the roles others wrote for us? She shows that you can defy that script. And when you do, people will be forced to respect you even if they don't want to. Imagine a young woman today starting from nothing, maybe in a small town where nobody believes she can make it, where every step she takes is met with doubt. If she chooses to keep going, to study harder, to build a business, to refuse to let her environment cage her in, she becomes a modern reflection of that same powerhouse spirit. Or think of the guy who comes from a family with nothing, who works 3 jobs, saves every penny, and turns his life into a story of success. That's not luck, that's not privilege, that's sheer willpower. That's the energy Hazrat Khadijah Ra embodied. And here's the thing most people miss: true power is quiet. It doesn't scream for validation. It's the confidence of knowing who you are without needing to explain it. She had that. She knew her place, not because society gave it to her, but because she carved it out with her actions. In our lives, it's the same. Power comes from showing up again and again, from not quitting when everyone else would have. It comes from carrying yourself with self-respect so strong that even those who doubt you are forced to acknowledge you. She wasn't just wealthy, she was wealthy in resilience, in faith, in clarity. She was respected because she respected herself first. And that is what makes her story more than history. It makes it a mirror. It tells us that if you want to be a powerhouse in your time, you don't need to wait for approval. You don't need to play by the old rules. You need to write your own. You need to build a foundation so strong that no doubt, no criticism, no obstacle can shake it. Her life wasn't just a story of success. It was a blueprint for every person who's ever felt underestimated, every person who's ever been told they can't. It's proof that not only can you rise above, you can rise so high that the same society that doubted you will one day celebrate your strength. She was the first to stand firm when no one else believed, And that's a type of strength that very few people ever find within themselves. Imagine what it feels like to be the only one standing in a room where everyone else is shaking their head, doubting, mocking, saying it's impossible. That takes a different kind of courage. It's easy to agree when the crowd agrees. It's easy to clap when everyone is clapping. But to be the first, to be the one who says, I see something here that you don't, that's rare. And it's the rare people who shape history, not the ones who just follow along. Think about your own life. How many times have you had an idea, a dream, or even a decision that nobody else around you understood? Maybe it was starting your own business. Maybe it was leaving a safe job. Maybe it was moving to a place where everyone said you'd fail. Those moments feel lonely, right? It feels like the whole world is pointing at you and waiting for you to fall on your face. That's the exact kind of moment she lived through, and instead of backing down, she stood even taller. That's what belief really is, not the soft, comfortable kind that only shows up when things are easy, but the hard, gritty kind that stands firm when everything around you is screaming, quit. When she believed, she didn't just whisper it quietly, she put her entire life behind it. Her status, her wealth, her influence, her comfort, all of it was put at risk because she knew what she stood for was worth more than what she could lose. And that's a test most people fail. Most of us hold on to our comfort zones like they're life rafts. But here's this person saying, I'll let it all go because truth is worth more than gold. Can you even imagine that mindset? It's the same type of spirit you see in inventors who spend years working in basements, being laughed at until the world finally wakes up to their vision. It's the athlete who trains in the dark, in silence, long before the crowd is cheering their name. It's the single mom who works 3 jobs, facing criticism from everyone who says she won't make it, but she still shows up for her kids every single day. That's standing firm when no one else believes. There's a weight that comes with being first. When you're first, you don't have proof to lean on. You don't have success stories to copy. You don't have the comfort of numbers. All you have is conviction, and conviction is heavy because it means you carry the burden alone. Yet, she didn't bend. She didn't hesitate. While others mocked, she stayed silent and solid. While others turned away, she moved forward. That's the kind of energy that doesn't just survive doubt. It transforms it. Because the second someone stands firm, the second someone says, oh, I believe, it sparks something in others. It shows them that maybe, just maybe, they can believe too. And that's how one person shifts the tide of history. We live in a world that constantly pressures us to blend in, to stay quiet, to not rock the boat. The majority will always tell you to be realistic, to be practical, to not risk too much. But progress doesn't come from the majority. Progress comes from the few who are willing to believe first, even when belief makes no sense. Her story is a reminder that standing firm isn't about being stubborn. It's about seeing truth with such clarity that the opinions of the crowd don't matter anymore. Take a moment and ask yourself, where in your life are you holding back because nobody else believes in you? Maybe you want to write a book and people say the market's too crowded. Maybe you want to heal a relationship and everyone tells you to just let it go. Maybe you want to build something so massive that your family thinks you're crazy. Whatever it is, if you wait for the crowd to believe, you'll wait forever. But if you stand firm, if you decide that your conviction is enough, then you're already stronger than the doubt surrounding you. That's what makes her story not just inspiring, but confronting. It forces you to measure your own belief. Because belief isn't proven when the crowd joins in. It's proven when you're alone, when no one claps, when no one understands, and you still move forward. She carried that weight with grace, and in doing so, she showed that being first isn't about being lucky. It's about being unshakable, and that lesson, more than anything, is what we all need to carry into our own lives when we feel like the only believer in a room full of doubters. She put everything on the line, not just a little, not just the parts that were easy to let go of, but everything, her wealth, her comfort, her social standing, the kind of things most people spend their whole lives protecting. She risked it all for something bigger than herself. Think about how powerful that is. In today's world, people cling to their money, their image, their lifestyle like it's the only thing keeping them alive. But real strength, real belief shows up when you're willing to lose everything for a purpose that's bigger than your own comfort. Imagine you have everything you ever wanted. You're financially secure, people respect you, you're admired in your community, and you could just sit back and enjoy life. Most of us, if we had that, would spend our energy protecting it, building walls around it, making sure nothing ever threatens it. But she looked at all of it, her wealth, her influence, her stability, and she said, if truth requires it, I'll give it all away. That's a level of sacrifice that most people can't even imagine because it's not about money. It's about courage. It's about what matters to you at the deepest level. Look around in daily life. There are people who dream of chasing their passion, but they never do because they're afraid of losing the paycheck, the status, the safe reputation. There are people who stay in jobs that kill their spirit or relationships that break their soul just because they're too afraid of losing comfort. But comfort has never created history. Comfort has never changed the world. It's only when you're willing to put everything on the line, when you're willing to sacrifice the things you think you can't live without, that you actually discover your real strength. That's exactly what she did. She didn't just support with words. She backed it up with action, even when it meant risking the very things that defined her standing in society. There's a story here that every entrepreneur, every dreamer, every fighter can relate to. When you invest everything you've got into a vision, when you put your time, your money, your reputation, your comfort into something that might not pay off immediately, people will call you reckless. They'll laugh, they'll doubt, they'll say you're wasting what you worked for. But the reality is nothing extraordinary has ever been built without sacrifice. Think about the athlete who wakes up at 4 a.m., sacrificing sleep, comfort, and social life to train. Think about the single parent who gives up their own dreams so their kids can chase theirs. Think about the person who risks leaving a safe career to build a business that everyone else thinks is a joke until one day it's not. That's what it means to put everything on the line. When she gave her wealth, she wasn't just writing checks. She was fueling a movement. She was saying, I'm all in. When she gave up her comfort, she was stepping into uncertainty, into risk, into the kind of life most people would run from. When she gave up her social standing, she was saying, I don't care what people whisper about me. I care about the truth I know inside me. And that's what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. The ordinary cling to what they have. The extraordinary risk it all for what they believe. Imagine the courage it takes to walk away from stability. Picture yourself being the richest person in the room, admired by everyone, and then choosing a path where people mock you, where your fortune is drained, where your comfort disappears. Most of us would collapse under the pressure, but she didn't. She stood stronger because she knew that what she was standing for was worth more than what she was giving up. That's the kind of mindset that flips the world upside down. We can see this lesson in our daily choices too. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you're putting something on the line. Every time you choose honesty over popularity, you're putting something on the line. Every time you choose purpose over paycheck, you're putting something on the line. It doesn't have to be billions in wealth. It can be the smallest daily sacrifice. But the principle is the same. True belief is proven not by what you hold on to, but by what you're willing to let go of. Her story is the reminder that if you want to live for something that matters, you can't be afraid to risk the things everyone else is protecting. Wealth, comfort, social standing, they're temporary. Purpose, truth, conviction, those are eternal. She showed us that when you put everything on the line for the right cause, you don't lose, you multiply. You don't weaken, you become unbreakable. You don't fade, you become timeless. Her support was both emotional and financial, and that's what makes her story hit on a level that most people miss. It's easy to say you believe in someone. It's easy to offer kind words, but real belief shows up in action, in sacrifice, in the things you're actually willing to give. She wasn't just there to say, I'm with you. She proved it every single day through her presence, through her wealth, through her encouragement. That's the kind of support that doesn't just hold someone up, it transforms them. Think about how powerful that is in your own life. How many people around you say they're your friend, say they're with you, but the moment life gets heavy, they're gone. Everyone loves to clap when you win, but who's there when you're struggling, when you're doubting yourself, when you're on the edge of quitting? Emotional support is rare because it requires energy, patience, and faith. Financial support is even rarer because it requires trust and sacrifice. She gave both. She gave her heart and her resources. She gave encouragement and action, and that combination is unstoppable. When you have someone in your corner like that, it changes the game. Imagine an athlete who trains alone every morning, pushing through pain, pushing through doubt. Now imagine that same athlete with a coach who believes in them, a family that cheers them on, a sponsor who invests in them. The difference is massive. Belief multiplies when it's shared. She became that multiplier, the person who fueled both the spirit and the mission. When others doubted, she lifted. When resources were scarce, she provided. When fear was heavy, she reminded with love. Look at how this applies to daily life. Maybe you're chasing a dream right now that nobody understands. Maybe you're starting a business, writing a book, working a side hustle, and all you hear is negativity. Imagine how different it feels if even one person stands beside you saying, "I believe in you, and I'm willing to back it up." That one person can be the difference between quitting and pushing through. That's why her story is so inspiring, because she wasn't just words, she was action. She didn't just talk about support, she embodied it. And let's not ignore the financial part, because money is energy, money is survival, money is the fuel that keeps movements alive. She didn't just give leftovers, she gave from her abundance. She gave the kind of resources that could have kept her comfortable, but instead she poured it into something greater. How many of us say we believe in a cause, but we never actually put skin in the game? How many of us cheer from the sidelines but never invest in the mission? She showed that if you truly believe, you don't just clap, you contribute. But financial support alone isn't enough. Money without heart is empty. She matched every sacrifice of wealth with an equal measure of emotional strength. When the world mocked, she encouraged. When the nights were heavy, she comforted. When fear crept in, she became the reminder of why it was all worth it. That balance of heart and hand, spirit and substance, is what made her support legendary, because the truth is anyone can throw money at a problem, but very few can pour their soul in it too. Imagine being in a storm, the wind howling, the ground shaking, and you're not sure if you can hold on. Now imagine someone standing beside you, holding your hand, telling you, "You're not alone, I'm with you, and together we'll get through this." That's emotional support. And then imagine them also saying, "Where's the shelter? Here's the food. Here's the resources to keep you alive while we fight this storm." That's financial support. When the two come together, the impossible becomes possible. Her example shows us how to be that kind of person in our own lives. It's not just about being there with kind words. It's about showing up with action. It's about telling your friend who's starting a business will be your first customer. It's about telling your sibling chasing a dream, "I'll help you buy the tools you need." It's about telling the people you love, "I believe in you so much that I'll invest in you." That's what real loyalty looks like. Too often we underestimate the power of support. We think success is individual, but behind every success story is someone who gave emotional fuel and someone who gave practical help. Her life is proof that when you combine both, you create an unstoppable force. She didn't just stand behind with words, she stood in front with action. And that's the kind of support that doesn't just change one life, it changes history. Her courage reshaped history, not because she fought wars, not because she had armies, but because she stood unshaken when the ground beneath her world was trembling. Courage isn't always about swinging swords or climbing mountains. Sometimes it's about standing still when everyone else is running away, about refusing to bend when the pressure is crushing, about holding on to truth even when it costs you everything. She lived in a time where the easiest choice would have been silence, where fear ruled over conviction, and yet she chose to stand tall, to be unbreakable. That single choice of courage didn't just change her own life, it changed the direction of history itself. Think about that in your own life. How often do we back down from fear? Not because the thing we're facing is impossible, but because it's uncomfortable. People stay in jobs they hate because they're afraid of the unknown. People stay quiet when they should speak up because they fear criticism. People bury their dreams because they're afraid of failing. Fear becomes this invisible prison, locking people into lives they don't even want. But courage is the key that breaks those bars. Courage says, "I'll risk it. I'll take the step. I'll speak when my voice shakes. I'll move when my knees tremble." That's exactly what she did, and that's why her story still echoes centuries later. Her courage wasn't loud, but it was relentless. When people mocked, She didn't flinch when people doubted. She didn't retreat. When people turned their backs, she stepped forward. And that's the kind of courage that inspires generations. It's not about winning instantly. It's about creating a path that others will one day walk. She became that path. By refusing to be silenced, by refusing to let fear control her, she proved that courage doesn't just protect your own soul, it can lift entire societies. Look at daily life examples. Think of the student who comes from a family where nobody believes in education, but they fight through poverty, through ridicule, and end up becoming the first graduate in their family. That courage reshapes not just their life, but the lives of generations after them. Think of the person who leaves behind an addiction, even when everyone says they're too far gone, and by doing so they break a cycle that had trapped their family for decades. That courage reshapes history in a personal but powerful way. Think of the woman who steps into a male-dominated industry, facing criticism, facing discrimination, but refusing to give up until she becomes a leader. That courage doesn't just change her career, it changes the rules for everyone who comes after her. That's the power of one person's courage. She embodied that power. Her courage created a shift that even the strongest voices of her time couldn't stop. She showed that courage isn't about having no fear, it's about refusing to let fear decide your actions. And that lesson is as real today as it was back then. Every single one of us is faced with moments where we can choose fear or courage. Sometimes it's small, like speaking up in a meeting, and sometimes it's massive, like leaving behind everything you've ever known to follow your purpose. But in every case, courage creates ripples, and those ripples often outlive us. The thing about courage is that it multiplies. When one person chooses courage, it gives others permission to do the same. When she stood unshaken, it gave strength to those who were wavering. When she refused to hide, it made hiding look like weakness. Courage is contagious. When you see someone else willing to sacrifice, willing to stand, willing to endure, it awakens something inside of you that says, if they can, maybe I can too. And that's exactly how her courage reshaped history. It didn't just protect her own convictions. It ignited belief in others, and that belief spread like fire. Too often we underestimate the impact of a single act of courage. We think the world is too big, that our lives are too small, that our decisions don't matter. But her story proves the opposite. One person's courage can break chains. One person's courage can challenge traditions. One person's courage can open doors that were shut for centuries, and once those doors are open, they never close again. Courage is the reason stories last. Wealth fades, power fades, beauty fades, but courage becomes a legacy. She lived with the kind of bravery that outlived her, that echoed beyond her time, that reshaped the lives of people who would never even know her name personally. And that's the challenge her story gives us today. To ask ourselves, where is fear stopping us, and where could courage not only change our lives, but ripple outward and reshape the future for others who will come after us. Her story forces reflection, not just in the sense of looking back at history and admiring what she did, but in the sense of holding up a mirror to your own life and asking yourself the hard questions. It's one thing to hear about someone's courage, loyalty, and sacrifice, but it's another thing to pause and ask, where do I stand in my own journey? What am I really willing to believe in? What am I actually willing to sacrifice? Her life doesn't just inspire, it confronts, because it doesn't let you stay comfortable. It whispers to you that belief without action is empty, loyalty without sacrifice is shallow, and love without courage is fragile. When you hear about her being the first to stand tall, the first to give everything, the first to remain unshaken, you can't help but compare it to your own choices. Would you stand that firm if nobody else believed? Would you give up your wealth, your comfort, your reputation if truth knocked on your door? Would you risk your own stability for something that mattered to the world? These questions are uncomfortable, but that's why her story matters so much, because it forces us to stop pretending and start reflecting. In daily life, we're constantly faced with moments that test us, but most of the time we avoid them. Think about how many times you've stayed silent when you should have spoken up. Think about how many times you've chosen the easy path instead of the right one. Think about how many times you've ignored your calling because fear whispered louder than courage. Her story calls you out on that. It makes you ask if she could risk it all. What excuse do I have? Reflection is powerful because it strips away illusions. We live in a world where it's easy to hide behind distractions, where we keep scrolling, keep working, keep chasing so we don't have to face the deeper questions. But her story cuts through that noise. It makes you sit with the uncomfortable reality of who you are and who you could be. And in that reflection, you find growth. Take an example from everyday life. Maybe you know someone who works a job they hate, but they stay because it pays well, because it keeps them comfortable. Deep down, they have dreams, passions, ideas, but they bury them under fear. When you reflect on her story, you realize that staying safe is actually the bigger risk, because you're risking your purpose. You're risking your chance to live a life that matters. Her example makes you ask yourself, am I just surviving, or am I actually living for something greater? Another example could be relationships. So many people stay in toxic environments because they're scared of being alone, scared of losing what little they have. But when you reflect on her loyalty and courage, you realize that true love, true support is about giving fully, not clinging desperately. It's about being strong enough to stand by someone even when the world turns against them, or being strong enough to walk away when the relationship is built on lies. Reflection makes you confront the truth. Are you surrounding yourself with people who would stand with you the way she stood, or with people who would abandon you when the pressure comes? Her story forces you to think about sacrifice too. What are you willing to give up for what you believe in? Too many people say they want success, but they won't sacrifice comfort. They say they want impact, but they won't sacrifice time. They say they want growth, but they won't sacrifice their ego. Her example makes you ask, what am I actually willing to lose to gain what really matters? Reflection also forces us to consider the legacy we're leaving. When people look back at your life one day, what will they see? Will they see someone who played it safe, who blended into the crowd, who lived for comfort and died forgotten? Or will they see someone who stood firm, who gave, who sacrificed, who inspired? Her story shakes you with that question because it proves that one person's courage and sacrifice can ripple across centuries. The truth is, reflection hurts because it exposes the gap between where you are and where you could be. But it's in that pain that transformation begins. Her story doesn't let you hide. It forces you to look in the mirror and admit that maybe you've been living too small, maybe you've been too afraid, maybe you've been too silent. And once you admit that, you can start to change it. She didn't just live a story to be admired, she lived a story to be imitated. And when you truly reflect on it, you realize it's not just about her, it's about you. It's about your choices, your courage, your sacrifices, your loyalty, your reflection on whether you are standing firm in your truth or simply drifting with the crowd. Her life forced you to confront the uncomfortable, but in doing so, it opens the door to becoming the kind of person who can leave behind a story worth remembering. And so when you take in her story, when you breathe in the weight of her courage, her sacrifice, her loyalty, you start to see that it's not just a story frozen in history, it's a mirror pointed straight at you. It asks you, what are you doing with your life? What are you willing to stand for? What are you willing to risk? Because if she could give her wealth, her comfort, her standing, her everything, just to support truth, then what excuse do we have for holding back from our own purpose? Life will always test you. There will be moments when the world laughs at you, when your dreams feel impossible, when even the people closest to you doubt you. That's when you need to remember that greatness has never come from comfort. Courage has always been lonely in the beginning. Belief has always looked foolish before it looked brilliant, but history is never written by those who gave up too soon. It's written by the ones who kept going when nobody else believed. Every single day you have a choice. You can choose to stay silent, to stay safe, to cling to what you know. Or you can choose to stand even if you stand alone. You can choose to give even when giving costs you something. You can choose to believe even when believing makes no sense. Because the truth is, people don't remember the ones who blended in. They remember the ones who dared to stand out. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't exist. Don't wait for the crowd to cheer you on. They won't at first. Don't wait until the fear disappears. It never fully does. You act in spite of it. You move forward even with your knees shaking. You speak up even when your voice trembles. Because the moment you decide that your purpose matters more than your fear, that's the moment you step into greatness. Remember this, the world doesn't reward hesitation, it rewards courage. The world doesn't admire excuses, it admires resilience. The world doesn't care about the comfort you protected, it cares about the battles you fought and the sacrifices you made. Comfort dies with you, but courage outlives you. Courage becomes legacy. There will always be people who doubt you. Let them. There will always be obstacles in your way. Break them. There will always be moments when giving up feels easier. Fight them. Because in the end, it's not the size of the obstacle that matters, it's the size of the heart facing it. And you don't need to be rich, you don't need to be famous, you don't need to have influence to change the world. All you need is the courage to believe when no one else does, the strength to give when it costs you something, the resilience to stand when everyone else sits down. That's how revolutions begin. That's how history is reshaped. When the storms come, and they will, don't ask for the storm to be smaller, ask for yourself to be stronger. When the nights feel heavy, don't beg for them to pass quicker. Build a fire inside you that burns so bright the darkness can't survive it. When life pushes you to the edge, don't step back in fear. Spread your wings and see that maybe the edge was meant to teach you how to fly. There is greatness inside you that you haven't even touched yet. There is strength in you that you don't even know you have. And sometimes it takes struggle, it takes sacrifice, it takes standing alone to bring it out. But once it's out, once you've unleashed it, you become unstoppable. So carry this story with you not as a tale of the past, but as fuel for your present. Let it remind you that no dream is too big, no sacrifice too heavy, no obstacle too great. Because the ones who change the world are not the ones who play it safe, but the ones who risk it all for what they believe in. Believe when no one else does, give when it hurts, stand when it shakes, and watch how your courage becomes the fire that lights the path for generations after you.